Hello and welcome to another episode of the Alchemy Experience podcast. Today we're taking a look at the concept of fear and how fear acts in our everyday lives. This recording will be with a live audience and we will get reflections, inputs and experiences from real people to talk about fear and how fear is interacted within their lives, how they've overcome it, and audience perspective on fear in terms of death and fear in our everyday lives really. As always, my comments and insights will be based on my own work with myself, my own experiences, insights through meditation and so forth, but also experiences I've drawn from my own clients, coaching people on reaching their highest potential and becoming the best versions of themselves. If you're interested in working with me as a coach, or perhaps interested in joining our weekly meditation sessions, group meditations that we do, you can always visit us at thealchemyexperience.co.uk, where you will find all information about our coaching, meditations, etc. We hope you all enjoy this podcast, and please let us know any feedback you might have, any guests you would like to hear, any topics you'd like to have covered. We're all ears. Okay, so as last time and the previous times, I would like to start with a quote. Today we're going to talk about fear in our lives. And there is only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve, and that's the fear of failure. Fear in our lives tend to impair ourselves from achieving greatness. Really, what makes us as miserable as we can be. When I think about fear, I've limited it to two categories of fear. We have existential fear and notional fear. So existential fear is the actual fear of death, fear of physical harm that will then lead to death. And then we have notional fear, which is the fear of death of self, death of your identity or something. But that eventually would then lead to the death of the physical self as well, because in the olden days, if you were pushed out from the tribe and you kind of had to survive on your own, your ability to survive would be diminished quite greatly. Same as being, fear of losing your job means fear of not having money, and thus fear of not being able to eat. If you can't eat, you die. So it all kind of leads back to the same end goal or end result, which is death of the physical self. So from my point of view, well, let's just back up a little bit. When we look at when we're born, we're actually fearless. They've done tests with babies, babies that can crawl, and they have these like glass sheets, and like they're 6 feet off the ground. These babies quite happily crawl over the edges. Like they don't have the concept of life and death in that respect, and that's why evolution has created primitive reflexes for us. So when we're born, we have the Moro reflex, for example. You have rooting reflex, palmar reflex, ATNR, bunch of different reflexes that helps us survive as infants. And these reflexes are then supposed to disappear as your neural pathways are developed and evolved and matured. Now, this will be for another podcast as well, but there are new studies. They're looking into what happens if those primitive reflexes are retained, which a lot of them lead back to ADHD, autism, ASC, which is autism spectrum condition, and stuff like that. And we'll dedicate a whole separate episode to that. But so from that point of view, I think it's interesting that as babies, we don't have any fear at all. So what is it that happens that develops this fear? I'm going to throw it out there, and let's just talk about the very basic concept of fear in our lives. I mean, I jokingly, a lot of times I say, when you are born, that's when you start dying or you start living. And why have fear of death? Because the most dangerous thing you can do is to be born in that respect. So once you're born, you're in it. And really, there's no point in being afraid of death, to me. Whether you're an atheist, agnostic, or you believe in, reincarnation, whatever you believe in or don't believe in, that death is a shift into something else, whether it being nothingness, paradise, or another lifetime, whatever it is. It's just a change, right? So I'll throw that out. Anyone
Yeah,
want to chime in, Carol?
I yeah, I don't mind going first if you don't mind that. So
Sure.
I agree with you. Like regardless of your faith and regardless of your religion, I think first thing I think we should be lucky. They are not my words. I think it was Richard Dawkins who said that I think we should be very lucky in the first place that we can die because we are alive. We are alive at the moment. We can enjoy our lives and we've got the choice. So as long as we breathe, we can make our life the way we want it to be. We control our actions, we can control our um, thoughts and words, and as long as we breathe, we are super lucky. So yeah, and we know what is after death, so why to fear it? And of course, it's easy to say than done, but coming back to the concept of fear, and again, it might be it's just kind of the way or the stage that I'm at the moment, but I feel quite lucky to have fear, and I feel that fear it's something that it's embedded within human nature and it's part of my nature. So rather than me trying to push it away, I try to use fear as guide. So how you define failure? Do you define the failure in terms of like through the social lenses? So if I'm gonna do that, if I'm gonna do that, then society is gonna judge me, or am I um, I've got different description of or definition of failure. So for example, if I'm not gonna do something that is according to my standards, then I'm gonna be judgmental toward myself, or am I kind of screw up something?
Mm-hmm.
So to me fear is one of those emotions, and same as you might say that love and compassion and joy, those are the basic emotions that they exist, but they are not positive or negative. Emotions just are. It's just the pattern of energy, whether it comes from however wherever system of beliefs you follow, whether this is just a pattern of neuronal activity and chemical and electrical activity in your brain, and whether there is an energy going through your body, wherever you believe. Emotions are just the patterns of the energy. So, and a fear, in essence, is the same. So
Right.
why judge it? Why judge whether it's good or bad? It's the communication. It wants to communicate to something. So and I actually I got to the point, I think, with my meditative practice, that I was going through the moment, a period of my life, that I was going through the meditation as a kind of just going through the movement rather than being aware and being in the moment. And I got to the point that I feel, again, it's very subjective and it might be completely nonsense for everyone else. But to me, it's like I fear the moment that I don't have fear. This is the good indication that if I feel fearless, it's the indication that there's something wrong with me. I
Okay.
love fear.
That's interesting.
That's the kind of conclusion.
Well, that's
So
suddenly throwing an interesting twist to it. Anybody else want to chime in on that? It's important to be
Hi,
open.
Christopher.
Yeah, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Millie. Myris is my daughter. That's sorry for clarification.
That's all right.
But when we talk about fear, there are two things that come to me. The first is, as Carol said earlier, fear of disapproval, failures. I think this is all very, very strong. I'm not talking about the fear of death. You covered that really well, but the fear of being rejected or being a failure means that your group will reject you, and this is also that refers to our survivals, ancient skills. So it's and then it's maintained and reiterated constantly in our society in various ways, and so I think that that very persistent perception of duality, that we need the exterior to help us succeed or being our fullest version, is wrong, and it requires an incredible sometimes effort to get past that. But there is also this other fear, and I think it's the fear of our own light. That brings that may translate into self-sabotaging, diminishing ourselves, surrounding ourselves with people who some sort of are on the same frequency, so you never go past that, and you sort of create a comfort zone around being a smarter version of yourself.
So you're talking about the fear of greatness.
Yes, and I think this is also very, very important to work on and to at least bring to our awareness. So to make sure when we get into those patterns, to have something in our hand to say, okay, cancel, cancel, cancel. You can do it. So yeah. So I think that's what I had to say. Just to and I think the best, I think not the best, who I am to say what to do, but I have that feeling that if we really try to get into a dialogue with our heart, really like what is inside us, and ask questions and try to follow that little voice, this is probably the surest way to navigate and progress, probably.
Well, I agree with that. I think the big challenge for most people is to hear that little voice, because they oftentimes can't hear it because of all the fear that exists in their lives. And the challenge I see, going back to what Carol was saying, with if you don't fear anything, that's a scary place to be, because then what has happened to your fear? Where did it go? And I think fear is always healthy to have, but it's the attachment to fear that humanity as a whole experiences that we need to let go of, and just understand, I have fear of public speaking. I know I have that fear, but I've dropped the attachment to it, and I've done that by hosting guided meditations every week, publicly on Zoom, doing this podcast, things like that. It allows you to progress and evolve when you allow yourself to drop the attachment to the fear. But yes, the fear will always be there, but now it's something that you recognize more on a logical or intellectual basis, rather than something that is in your body. Does that make sense? Anybody else have any points to kind of bring in on just the basic idea of notional and existential fears?
Absolutely. I'd like to also bring in the neurological part of it too, because I think a lot of people end up having phobias and other issues because fear, anxiety, and excitement are all intertwined in the neurological body. So a lot of times it's very difficult. Like, for example, I know for myself, when I go on stage and I perform singing, I have a really big, powerful voice. But what I find is that it's almost that fear, excitement, energy, and then vibing off of the audience, that literally my notes are higher. My ability to be able to really connect in that sense. It's like I'm literally hearing my voice as an instrument in a way I've never heard it before, because it takes that synergy of all that fear and all that excitement and those, you know, pieces before you get on stage. And I really like what you were talking about with fearlessness, because I believe that there have been so many times in my life where I was fearless. And like, I was reflecting on the fact that when I was 8 years old, I played Nancy in Oliver Twist, and I'm singing Papa as an 8-year-old in a school play, which is, you know, kind of like going like, oh my Lord, you know, it's like, did I really do that? And yes, I did. And I was walking up and down the aisles pretending like I had beer steins in my hands. And then I was on stage at 12 in front of thousands of people, and I went flat. I didn't do a good job because I couldn't sing with a live band. But, you know, that it's like, but there was also the form of all these people who rejected me and bullied me because I was so different from them. That in some ways, that was actually a gift for them to bully me, because it gave me the freedom, because I didn't need to belong. I didn't need to be like them.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the fear of rejection, because you know they're going to reject you anyway, then you literally get to carve out and forge out your own path.
Yeah, you didn't belong to begin with, so you have no fear of not belonging. It's and I think exactly as you're saying, Barbie, the, you know, people that experience fear of abandonment and these things have an innate independence and idea of freedom, so they forge their own way anyway. So I think there's certainly, and that's a good way to look at the gifts that you may have gotten from those kind of traumatic experiences, Barbie. So that's absolutely. And we'll actually come back to the joy of fear in a little bit. It's one of the points I want to touch on. But so let's tackle the big one, the fear of dying, or the fear of death. To me, I don't have fear of death. I don't have fear of what's on the other side, you know, whether it's nothing or reincarnation or paradise or hell or whatever it may be, because I have my clearly formed idea of what is beyond this physical existence. What most people fear is actually the process of dying. It's not so much the actual transition from life to death. It's the dying, it's the pain, it's the suffering, it's all the, you know, seeing the trauma of having people around you that are suffering, etc., etc. What do you guys feel about that?
I think.
I would say,
Go ahead, Brenda.
I don't so much have a fear of like the process of dying or what's on the other side of dying. For me, it's more about, am I accomplishing everything that I want to accomplish in this life and making the impact that I want to make? That's the biggest thing for me. The other thing for me is my stuff. Like, you know, what happens to your stuff, and making sure you don't have too much stuff for other people to have to deal with when you're gone.
I think most people fear not having enough to leave behind. So that's the first time I've had that one, Brenda. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What were you going to say, Carol?
I was going to say a couple of things. Thank you, Christopher. So first thing, I think it was Tolstoy who said that, like, you know, if you're leading like kind of crappy life, then you're gonna have crappy death. But if you can try to make your life beautiful, then you're gonna have, you know, you're gonna die beautifully. And you know, the death to me is like such a abstract concept that, you know, I'm scared of it. Like, I'm not gonna, and I don't know what is there. I just don't know, and I cannot physically kind of comprehend. So more rather than dying, I'm, you know, I'm kind of scared of like suffering, if that makes sense. But on the other hand, what I'm trying to do to kind of manage that fear, it's I do a lot of stoic meditation. So, you know, a few times a day, I just have a very brief and a very short visualization in which I feel, you know, that something worse is happening to me, like, you know, my dog is dying, or, you know, my wife, or like I'm dying of cancer or whatever. It's just like, you know, 40 seconds, very brief negative stoic visualization, as kind of recommended by Marcus Aurelius. And then And I don't know, and then it just rewires me, and then I appreciate everything. I can appreciate rain, I can appreciate the clouds, and it just gets that, removes that fear.
Yeah.
And it's not like static, it's not something that is being maintained, and it doesn't, I'm not saying that it's, I'm completely removing fear from my life.
Mhm.
It's just like management of it. I know that when it comes, I can deal with it. I've got tools to deal with it. So yeah.
Anybody else have any input on the existential fear? So
I'd like to say something about that because it's definitely a part of my journey has been the fact that in 2016 I got diagnosed with a chronic illness that felt like a death sentence. And
right.
I've been all around the world and I've lived on 3 continents and I've done all this amazing stuff. And then you know, built into the illness is fatigue, and you're pretty much going to work and having to go home. And then I had to cancel a lot of my plans. I couldn't do the travel that I wanted to do. It just really felt like a death sentence. But I really, at that moment, I started to focus instead on the things that I could control. And I realized that if I didn't know how long I was going to live at that time, because it was really bad, I was just going to basically spend my money as if it were my last days. And I started having this really different approach about abundance and of feeling just very rich and full of whatever I wanted, because ultimately this was something that I had put out there and I was going to use it for myself, like what Brenda was talking about with your stuff. It's like I might as well use my stuff. So it really started to focus my kind of ideology about really becoming the VIP in your own life, because I realized that we do all this stuff where we're focused completely on when company comes over, and we'll save the good china for when we have guests and other things like that. And it's like, who lives in your house? You do. So instead, it's like really, really focusing on, then you can look at your blessings and you can look at the things that you're grateful for. But it really has, I mean, I had to take a good hard look at that and see, you know, I don't know how much longer I have to live at this moment. And it totally shifted every single way that I did everything in my life.
And that's a hero story of trauma, isn't it? I always say in my coaching practice that you have 2 choices out of every experience. You can choose to become a victim or a hero. You can either wallow and kind of delve into the misery of it, or you can take the gifts and the gratitude of the lessons from it.
Yes.
So that's wonderful, Barbie. Congratulations, really. And you know, it's that idea of living like it's your last day, but expecting to live forever.
Yes. Yes. That's a big conundrum. Absolutely.
And that's the paradox, isn't it? And it's trying to figure out, how do I balance that paradox within myself? Because it comes down to being the emotional, you know, if you know you're going to die tomorrow, that could, in essence, create a lot of fear. But at the same time, taking away the fear and living with the just freedom of knowing that you're going to do everything that you can to maximize today, but also in your mind knowing that I'm going to live, you know, 400 and 700 years or whatever. I think it's Peter Diamandis who's said he's going to live until he's like 600 years old or something. If anybody listens to the Exponential Wisdom podcast, it's very interesting. Some very innovative ideas on longevity there. But yeah, no, I think that's a really good angle there, Barbie. And Sherry?
Yes, I'm a bit older than most of you, obviously. About in 2013, I was suffering from vasculitis that they said was going to kill me in a couple of years because I was bleeding into all of my my critical organs, and I also had a cancer. And the doctor said they didn't want me. I had paid for a trip to South America to go and see a number of shaman. We were going to do ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
And ayahuasca is not a party drug, as some of you may know. It was an absolutely horrible experience. But as I went into this with my power animals, and I said, the only reason I was going is because I knew I was dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to die in peace. So I went into this with the attitude of, we have to find, to find this deep peace. And I said, it was a horrible, it really was a horrible experience.
I'm sure.
And I
Yeah.
got to the point where I'm laying there, I can't move. It was, I'm going, okay, if I'm going to die right now, it's all right. And when at one point they came in and they said, you've got to start drinking more water because your kidneys are shutting down. And I'm going, I wasn't worried about drinking water. I was actually, the water I had, I was pouring on me because it was so hot. But I started to drink the water, and all of a sudden I'm going, okay, I don't need more water. I got to go potty. And I went outside and I just started purging. I mean, I walked out and I'm 25 feet up in the air and I'm throwing up all over the ground. And I looked at my teacher and I said, you know what? Fuck this. And I said, you know what? Fuck everything. And he just smiled at me. And I remember feeling, okay, if I die right now, it's okay, which was kind of a selfish thought because my friends was going to have to carry my rather large body out of the jungle. But it stopped. I mean, I'm 69 years old. The women in my family never make it past 70. And I may or may not make it past 70. I don't really, it's irrelevant. It's like, I realize that I have no idea what's on the other side. I really don't care, I'm just here to, God, you can see I'm technically not put together because I can't get this stuff right.
All right.
But I just,
So do you think it's the point of no return that alleviates your fear? No, having knowledge and not being kind of faced with the unknown, you kind of know.
I'd never really thought about it before. And as when you get to, like I say, as you get older, there's an awful lot of, I mean, your mortality becomes much more real.
Sure.
I mean, and I did it was kind of bizarre because I was in Iquitos, Peru, and they told us, the women were always supposed to go out in pairs, and you definitely don't go out alone at night, which I had enough sense not to do that. But I didn't think twice about wandering around the place in the long run.
Right.
My Spanish really sucks. I won't starve to death, and I can always find a bathroom. But I've always had the ability to make life as much of a game and adventure as possible. And I come from a very poor background, and I haven't had the chances to do a lot of bizarre adventures because the money has just never been there. And I think that I was thinking about one thing that was said earlier about fear of greatness.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come from a background like mine, you don't want to allow your gifts to come out too much because, basically I'm poor. I always said I was white trash with a brain, and you really get rejected from that space.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who do you think you are? You're using big words. Or
Yeah.
And I find when I heard that, I'm going, my God, you've done that all your life.
And it's that shunning from the tribe or the community.
Yeah. And you don't belong there to begin with, so why give a shit?
Yeah. No, and it's that kind of very well segues into the notional fears, you know, where we basically I would say 99.99% of the fears that we have are constructed. They're notional fears. They don't
Yes.
actually exist. You know, it's programming. It's all, you know, from our parents, schools, religion, society, news, social media, whatever it is. And it's those fears predominantly because, I mean, I went through a period where I had this fear of snakes for some reason, and I think it was, you know, for anybody who knows about spirit animals or power animals, know that snake is kind of comes when you're going through a energy purging or healing period. So I think it was that because I constantly got images of snakes in my head, and I think I've only seen a snake in the wild once in my life, and it was like a black adder that, you know, it's not going to kill you anyway unless you're sensitive to it. But no, this I was thinking about black mambas and you know, king cobras and what have you, and I've never been to Africa like that, so it wasn't really something that I had to worry about. Yet it was every time I thought about it, it sent shivers down my spine, kind of thing. It's those kind of notional fears that, or unrealistic fears, that we bring into ourselves. Now, you know, losing your job and not having enough money to eat and all of that, is that a real or a notional fear? What is to fear beyond that? Is it that we fear the unknown? Is it that we fear losing our comfort that is seen as part of that death? Personally, I think there's also, you can, part of the notional death is the death of identity. So you lose your identity and then you're like, you don't know who you are anymore. And that's the fear of dying as well. And that's anyone who's experienced rock bottom and kind of come out of it with not knowing what's ahead of them, that kind of helps to alleviate any fears that one might have had, because you had no choice. You're now on the other side. It's kind of a near-death experience. So anybody want to chime in on that? Barbie, go ahead.
Ironically, Brenda and I were just talking about this yesterday with travels, because she had asked me if I'd been to Africa, and she's been to South Africa. And I was in Morocco at the Kasbah, and they had asp snakes in boxes, and they asked for a volunteer to see who would be willing to put it around their neck. And I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. And so I was there, you know, with the asp around my neck. And I actually do have an African ball python. It's actually a foot to the right of me right now. So I literally had somebody gift me a python because their mom didn't like it. And then it literally, like, it became my buddy. And I have pictures of it that it would actually crawl into my French braid and hang out. And I would literally have it at work. And it was like in my hair for like 8 hours. It was just sitting there chilling, like, you know, but it's also the whole thing that, you know, going back to the ancient Egypt, that in ancient Egypt, they actually used to have the cobras on their heads as basically a way to be able to ward off, you know, evil. Mm-hmm. And in African cultures, they actually have the chiefs actually have a ball python on each wrist, each ankle, and around their neck to show how like strong and how fearless they are, etc. So it is an interesting thing that for some people, the phobias are really what those things that end up coming up, because they are technically irrational. But even in like psychology, they have those things of where there was one lady, she was allergic to strawberries. And every time she saw strawberries, she always had this fear. She got vertigo. It was really bad. And then she just didn't have anything that was strawberries around her. And then she moved into an apartment and they were like, what is going on? Why is she having the vertigo? And they realized that the Formica counter in her kitchen had little strawberries in actual like kitchen, that she was so freaked out by strawberries that her subconscious literally flipped her back into the vertigo. So yeah. It's just those things of where you're absolutely right. It's like it's that the acronym of false evidence appearing real. that a lot of times you think it's actually something that you're afraid of, but ultimately it also pushes you. And that's that hero's journey with Joseph Campbell. That's much about the, you know, the wounded healer, the hero's journey with Joseph Campbell talks about that, of where there has to be a transformative type of a thing. And ultimately, everyone who's on this call right now, those of us who've had things that have happened to us, that's what we have to be able to have as our impetus to be able to push us forward to grow. But the people whose lives are just like going along and everything's just fine, they don't have a reason to grow. They don't have a reason to figure anything out because everything's just fine.
No, absolutely. And some people actually argue the only way to feel really alive and be present is to feel fear. If you end up in a situation where you are in a fight, flight, or freeze moment, where you know you're facing a lion or cheetah or tiger or something, or a snake in this case, you get so focused on the present moment that you feel more alive than you have ever felt before. And a lot of times soldiers that end up in combat will attest to that as well. And there is that addiction to fear that you see race drivers, for example, or people that very dangerous sports like race car driving or base jumping, or you know, any of these things. And you know, military is one of those things as well. But you also have like ER doctors, that kind of fear of life and death in the balance, all of those things. There's a certain addictive element to that. You can, you know, you talk about adrenaline addiction. But I wanted to talk a little bit about also the, you know, these notional fears. What is the, in order to break through those fears and come out the other end and kind of master the fears, what are the antidotes, or not the antidote, but what is the way that we can overcome our fears as a general kind of remedy?
Can I make a comment? My first
Please do, Diana.
existential threat. Hi there, Christopher.
Hi.
My first existential threat happened when I was very little, and I've had them more than once. One of them in that moment of clarity when something, I was flying an airplane, I'm a pilot, and something happened that, it was interesting. My focus became 100% on solve the problem. And it felt like hours went by while I was doing it. It had to be happening in split second or we would have crashed. But, you know, that's another point. But to address your question, I think that part of how you conquer fears is you have to tell your conscious, I mean, keep in mind, your conscious mind is out there trying to keep you safe. That's its job. And so you have to just say, shut up, I got it. Now, how am I going to solve this problem? And I think even when I was very little and something happened that had me think, I'm dead. And my emotions, I mean, I'm a little tiny, like 3-4-year-old crying my heart out because I just think, you know, all is lost. Somewhere in the back of my head, there was a resilient part. And resilience, I think, is a really important thing that said, okay, who do I know who could solve this problem? Mighty Mouse. I don't know if any of you are old enough to even know who Mighty Mouse is. He is a cartoon figure. He's this happy little guy with a big smile on his face, but he's able to beat up the strongest cat in the block. And I mean, I'm a kid, you know, I got to work with references.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I decided, okay, I could be Mighty Mouse. I could save my day. And whether it's Mighty Mouse or, you know, like, just shut up, brain. Let's deal with what we know about how to solve this problem in an airplane, as seconds, split seconds mattered. I think learning how to be aware and conscious, which is what we're all doing here in Mind Valley, and learning how to manage your mind and focus on what's important now is really a lot of the secret to managing fear, at least for me. I mean, I have to allow myself to be afraid. because I am afraid. And it's like, okay, great. You've had your day. Now let's deal.
Well, it's again that feeling the fear, but not attaching yourself to it.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Can I add one thing to that too?
Sure,
First
Barbie.
of all, of course, Diana, here I come to save the day.
Yes.
Way. It's absolutely, and that is so cool to be able to do that. And I think also too, like you just reminded me in the sense of where my dad was a firefighter and he, you know, jumped out of helicopters for water drops. And as you were talking, all that adrenaline junkie, and my brother does the extreme, you know, biking where he goes down Haleakala in Hawaii and at like 90 miles an hour, just the kind of stuff where, you know, that's not my jam. But I've also been in situations where I've had 3 opportunities in my life where I've saved people's lives, and one person had a seizure. And it's like, what I've found is that the brain almost, when you see something that's like an emergency like that, there are certain people that are really great to be around when there's an emergency because they don't go into that panic mode like the, you know, the captured deer. But like for me, all of a sudden it's like a whole entire, it's like the Matrix, like something opens up and just goes, whoa, and the next thing you know, I'm just completely calm, able to handle the situation. And there was a 90-year-old man who literally tripped at the stairs at the LAX or the federal building when I was getting my passport in LA, and nobody saw him fall. And there's 300 people there. And I literally asked my friend to bring like napkins from the Korean restaurant we were at. And we had all these napkins because he was bleeding from the back of his head. And I was talking to him like, what is your name? What, you know, how are you doing? Et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, and all of a sudden people started looking around like, oh my God, something's happening. But it's still, it's like in those opportunities, we really have that opportunity to say, I don't care whether I have fear. I was wearing a nice dress. I had blood all over my hands, etc. But it was like, that was so important in that moment to be able to just be so completely laser present. But it's almost like you're in an altered state at that moment. And it's kind of the coolest thing. And if anyone else has had that experience, it's just so awesome and amazing to be able to really be completely present and in a service to another human being who is in a complete 100% crisis.
Absolutely. Nicole, I'm going to go to you in a second. I'm just going to kind of go back to what I said last time we all got together. It's the idea of the best in people come out, when there's a crisis, the best come out in people. And I've heard and I agree with the fact that it's not the best that comes out. Everybody sinks down to the lowest level of preparation or preparedness. So if you've dealt with fear internally and your approach to it, you're going to be much more clear and succinct in your ability to address that fear and the situation at hand. So Nicole, I'll go to you.
Yeah, so you're asking how would one kind of master fear? And I think that what's clear from these examples we've just heard is that when one's confronted with the fear, oftentimes in a life or death situation, you have no choice, and then you conquer it. And then, as Barbie was just saying, you feel so good after it. And so if you were to take those big events, if you will, and then sort of say, how can I bring it back into my daily practice to really master it? Because that was just a test right there. But sort of like, then how do you prepare for this next test, or how do you conquer it? I would say it is like then the feeling, that confidence that Barbara was just talking about really gives you the sense of, I can do it again. And then to put yourself with little events that might do it. Like, for example, when I was 12, before they had a lot of security in the amusement parks, I was doing a double loop roller coaster for the first time. I was on a class field trip, and my seatbelt didn't work, or the bar. And I raised my hand to say, hey, my safety equipment's not working, but no one saw me, and the thing started going. So I was essentially doing the double loop where it stops midway, halfway for 1 second, and then it goes backwards, but without any restraints in place. And so obviously then my whole body was falling out, and I was so scared, and I felt everything falling out. So I just pushed against the seat so hard. Anyway, I survived it. My back was black and blue. And for like I was just like completely shaking after that ride, because, you know, twice my body was just like, would have fallen off if I didn't push myself back in.
Oh yeah.
But so that, well, luckily I had that moment of it, but so then in terms of now, I have a huge fear of roller coasters, etc. But I think that somehow I've been able to like push through it, sort of then test yourself a little bit in safer conditions, which one's fearful of, but they just each time in terms of feeling the confidence that you did it is a remarkable way to like master it. And now as a parent, for example, with my kids, let's say if they were learning a new language or something, I put them in that environment and say, go ask for bread or something little things. And I think it's in this building up, conquering little things that one gets confidence to feel that they can approach fear in a positive way.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. And I do the same thing with my children. Everybody needs to be exposed little by little to that fear. I will say though that you always have a choice. So when you show up to that situation where you have a choice of fight, flight, or freeze, you have that choice. You can choose one of those three. Clearly, Barbie in that situation with the man who fell down the stairs chose to fight, as it were, to show up. But some people might choose to freeze because that's their lowest level of preparedness. They're simply not prepared to deal with that kind of situation. Some others flee because, again, they just do not know how to show up to that situation. It was a leading question, what was the way to overcome fears? You can't control your fears, but you can control your thoughts. And fears, in my experience, fears come from experiences or programming that we've had throughout our lives. So in my coaching practice, I ask all my clients to look at the fears that come out of stressful situations and try to find the first situation where they can remember having experienced that fear. So the original sensitizing event. And look at that situation and see, is this a realistic fear? Is this a fear I really need to embody? So it comes down to reframing the fear, but using your thoughts and reframing your thoughts around that fear. So again, more like last time we talked about control. So you can control your words, your thoughts, and your actions. So you can't control your emotions, you can control your thoughts that produce those emotions, right? That would be my solution to it, anyway.
Christopher?
Yep.
I wanted to, echoing what Barry was talking about in the crisis time, and with the very generous testimony from Cherry. There is something that once in my life, about 20 years ago, I came very close to die, and I really had to fight for my life. And at that moment, a certainty, something bigger than me, opened, and I knew that I was not going to die, even though the most likely scenario was for me to die. So that was, I was training for my scuba diving, and I was in a year exchange program with the Fiji Islands. And so we were in the open ocean. It was only the second time for me. And so I jumped in the water, and I have all my gears, including the silver, not the silver, what's the name of that belt in English, that you have, the belt that you have around your
weight
waist.
belt.
The weight belt.
Mm-hmm.
And the instructor says, okay, the first jump in the water, and we're going to train you in the water. So I jumped first. And what happened is that nobody had predicted it, but micro earthquake happened on the ocean floor, not far from where we were. And very suddenly, super high waves started, and I was in the water, and the other people were not, the other students were not yet. And I got washed away from the boat very, very briskly. And the current, the strength of the ocean was so overwhelming and so strong. And very quickly the boat became, I was taken away from the boat. And at that time I thought to myself, okay, you have to fight for your life now. And even though it seemed impossible to reach the boat, I was against the waves. The waves were like sort of messy. I came close to the boat 3 times, even being able to grab it at one point, but washed away before the other people in the boat could grab me. And I was getting exhausted. And that's when I say some sort of space inside me opened, and I knew I was not going to die, and I was not going to drown. And I went for my fourth tentative, and then I was just maybe 2 seconds before the next wave would take me, and I knew that it would be my last attempt, because I was so exhausted of trying to swim back to the boat. And those 2 seconds were sufficient for the people in the boat to take me and lift me up. And they were so on adrenaline themselves that with my bottle, the weight belt, being soaked, the wetsuit, etc., they literally pulled me out the water like this. And at that moment, I remember I said, when it's not your time, it's not your time. You can die in much more simple way, whereas in something a bit extreme like that, and then you survive. Yeah, that gave me some sort of faith that I still had some stuff to go to have some more life to live. And that was a very turning point for me in my life.
Yeah, and I think that's a key aspect. We don't control it. We don't know when, we don't know how, we don't control it. So again, going back to last discussion about control, if we can't control it, why worry about it? Why fear it? We know it's going to happen at some point. So why, you can put it to the side that, okay, well, it will happen when it happens. So yeah, I think that's a very good point. And just that innate knowing that it's not going to happen, or when it does happen, that you're okay with it. The releasing, and it's the thoughts that you apply to it and you apply towards it, I think are very strong keys to that.
And I was wondering if it's only me or if it has come to other people in the group awareness, but going back to Cherry's testimony that really touched me, when she talked about going with ayahuasca with her spirit animals, and that resonates in the sense that it has some sort of like being aggregated together in the last few months, that there are various techniques that seems to get more and more attention, such as lucid dreaming, out-of-body experience, transcendental travels, that seem to have the same baseline of as a side effect to release the fear of death somehow. So I'm just starting to like explore, but it seems to some sort of like it's come to more global awareness, I suppose, because I'm not such I'm not into that field at all, but it's still like reached me. And so there is like some sort of like a momentum, I don't know. Maybe.
No, absolutely. And I know where you're going with it, and I appreciate the help on the segue. So it's I mean, to me, really ending up in a situation where you kind of you erase the whiteboard, if you like, or you take all the programming, all the fears that you've been told that you must have in your life that sits on this whiteboard, and you just take a big sponge to it and you wipe it clean. Sorry, go ahead, Barbie.
The tabula rasa, that's the most important thing, because ultimately it's like, even learning all these type of things, etc. It's like with everyone now has this like perspective that, oh, well, you need to do social media and you need to post this and you need to do this and you need to do that, and this is how your journey is going to go, whatever, etc. My particular situation is completely not that. So therefore, as you were talking about Christopher being, like afraid of public speaking, but here you are doing a podcast, and it's like, for me, I don't really like being on video, and I'm doing a TV show. So it's kind of like basically the same exact thing of where, you literally step out of your comfort zone because the mission is bigger than you. And that's the part of it too, of like, you co-create that. And Meli, I am planning in December to doing a soul travel workshop with our group, because that's something that I've been practicing for the last 20, 30 years. And when you have the opportunity to have all these like multidimensional pieces, it's also interesting because a lot of the things that you appear or believe to be real in a lot of ways really are not.
No, absolutely. And it's the allowing your subconscious to understand that those things are not important and you just need to get rid of them. And I think it's interesting now with all the trials they're doing on the psilocybin, for example, magic mushrooms, more commonly known. But I heard someone talk about psilocybin having the effect of that as you kind of go through life, you create these grooves in your mind. It's like a ski slope, and you just keep going down the same grooves, whether that being fears or programming or bullshit rules that we're talking about. They all kind of create their own grooves, and you just keep going down those same grooves over and over and over again. They become kind of on repeat in your consciousness, fed from your subconsciousness. And psilocybin or ayahuasca or any of these psychedelics then has the ability to essentially create new snow that falls down on this ski slope and basically wipes the slate clean and allows you to see that there is nothing to be afraid of. And it's the same effect that happens when a lot of people that describe near-death experiences, or once you hit rock bottom, all that fear, you've experienced all the fear that you can in one go. There is no more fear to be had. You go into life and it's like there's only opportunities now. It's like a blank slate, and you can really, you're in a situation where you're now allowing yourself to really be the creator of your own experiences. Yeah, go, Carl.
So thank you very much, Christopher. So when you were saying about those grooves, and I think this is excellent book. I would strongly recommend it to everyone. It's by David Eagleman. It's called Life Wired, and he talks about basically brain and how it works and how we are conditioned. And it's absolutely fascinating book that explains the way we experience emotions, the way we experience reality. And one of the, I think, that moments that enabled me to change kind of the perception, it's not only written in that book, but in like, in several different authors, and it's known in philosophy for quite some time, is the fact that we don't see reality and the world as it is. We construct reality. So your brain doesn't have receptors. It just it's in that very dark place in the side of your skull, and it uses eyes and ears and your sensory input to create reality.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nothing more than just kind of the zoop of electrical signals that are going through your brain, really. So, and you add meaning and attachment to everything. And, whether any conditions that you have, whether, it makes your life for good or wrong, this becomes real. And yeah, and I've never had any kind of psychedelic experience, but I've been trying to meditate quite a lot, and it changes your perspective, and you can see, and the concept that Barbie was talking about, the tabula rasa, you can see the things from distance, and you can it makes you realize that, oh God, I believed that for like 30 years, and it's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. Like I had so many conversations in the last few weeks that, people are saying like, you shouldn't use that word, or you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or you can't say that. I'm like, why? I said it's kind. Is it truth? Is it necessary to say?
Is that
And if
helpful?
yes, is it helpful? Yeah. And if it's yes, I'm gonna say that.
Yeah.
And I believe that sometimes the conflict is the only one way to kind of enable people to grow, and you can't really, and so you can't always avoid conflict, or you cannot always avoid argument, because you wouldn't be given the opportunity and platform to expand yourself and broaden your horizons.
As long as
But
you
if you do it,
always add the word compassion in front of it.
yeah,
Compassionate
absolutely,
conflict or compassionate argument.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And this is the place that, I feel that if you want to defeat your fear, if you can defeat your fear, or it's just the love and kindness and compassion is the starting point. And if if this is your starting point, you are sorted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of times it's the fear of letting go of what we've known. So in terms of the programming and the rules, we are fearful of letting go of the place of comfort, even if we know it's something that is detrimental to our happiness and our well-being. We are afraid to let it go. I mean, smoking habit is a typical one like that. I smoked for way too long, and it's the imagining myself at that point without not being a non-smoker was inconceivable to me, because I knew I would have to go through the pain of withdrawal and quitting and all of that in order to get there. And so it was much easier to stay a smoker, even though I knew it was going to kill me eventually. So it's the fear of the dying, if you like. If smoking is my identity, it's the fear of dying, or the process of dying in that identity, and the fear of not knowing, is it actually going to be better once I'm through there on the other side? Is this pain I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life? So there's a lot of different perspectives to the fear, and this is just a microcosm of it. But it's the fear of the unknown is one of the very big ones, as you touch on there, Carol. So it's if before we kind of wrap up here, is there any other aspects of fear that you guys want to touch on? Anything you feel that I've missed?
I just want to add something about courageous conversations, because I think a lot of that is a lot of fear too.
Yeah.
And I know Keith Ferrazzi talks a lot about that in regards to authentic networking, et cetera, et cetera. And just this week, I've had to have in business dealings, I've had to have 2 very intense, courageous conversations of where you really have to say exactly what it is that you need as the objective by dropping your agenda, but really speaking truth to power, and knowing that both of those things, when you're aligned with it energetically, the frequency is pure and it oftentimes is conveyed, et cetera. And I feel a lot of times people have more respect for you for being able to convey that. And so I think a lot of people, based on fear, don't say what they need to say. So a lot of people run around literally with all these unspoken words that they need to get out of themselves, but ultimately it's the fear of, like, somebody not liking them or whatever else, et cetera. So I think that those courageous conversations, I think, of just, I'm not willing to have anything less anymore anywhere in my life.
Absolutely. I think that's very much key to the process. So again, before we wrap up, I think the way that you think about fear and the way you think about how you want to create your life is key to letting go of fear, because it's the fear of stepping into the unknown is that oftentimes what holds you back. So fear is what stands between you and greatness, knowing that the greatness is the better place to be. So that's where we want to step in. So I want to thank you, everybody, who's contributed, who listened in and just brought your beautiful energies to this podcast today, talking about fear, and hopefully
Thank you.
See you soon again. Some truly powerful stories there, don't you agree? If you think about it, if we're unconscious about our own existence in the world or our own presence, fear is omnipresent and really takes over and controls our lives. So every time you get triggered or stressed for any reason, always know that there is an element of fear underlying to that trigger or stress. The beauty, of course, is that once you identify that fear, then you are also having your first clue to where that fear comes from and how you can go about healing it, because you go back to the original sensitizing event of that fear, where you experienced that fear the first time, and then you can approach that experience with compassion, acceptance, forgiveness and gratitude. So if you experience fear in your life, see it as a gift, see it as because it is a clue to your healing journey. Now, fear is something that is predominant and omnipresent in your life, and you feel overwhelmed by it, by all means get in contact with us to see if our coaching program might be able to help you on your journey. As always, if you go to thealchemyexperience.co.uk, you will have access to all our recorded guided meditations, our writings, and of course information about our coaching practices, both for businesses and individuals. I thank you, and I am grateful for you listening to this podcast, and hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed being part of making it and being part of the discussion. So until next time, I wish you all the best and take care.